First year, everybody thought we were kind of crazy. I think that's the same thing that one of our panelists, Paul Stubblebine, ran into when he started the tape project. Everybody said, what are you, crazy? And 10 years later, tape is going strong. You'll see in a slide in a second or two, there's now 23 companies that are releasing music on reel-to-reel tape. And that's pretty amazing given digital was released in 1980 and analog was kind of prematurely pronounced dead on arrival. So not to waste any time, so quickly we're going to go over a couple things today. I'm Miles Astor. I'm with Positive Feedback, and also I've started my own sort of bulletin board called Audio Nirvana. And if guys want to go to it, we actually have a lot of tape discussion going on there. And also, if people want to go to the tapeproject.com, that's another great resource for any questions that people have on reel-to-reel tape. So basically, we have an outstanding panel. In fact, I can't believe the panel that Chad worked so hard to put together this year. We've got Chad, who's going to make an announcement today about his jumping into making reel-to-reel tape. Dan Labrie, who's the Technical Services Director from ATR Services, and he's the guy that really works to keep all those ATR 102s in the studios running. And the whole group there has always been a great resource to the tape area. Chris Mara, who's owner of Welcome to 1979 Studios in Nashville, also Mara Machines that restores machines, and finally Paul Stubblebine. And Paul's part of the group at the Tape Project, Paul, Dan Schmally, and Mike Romanowski, who basically gave birth to tape again. They basically were the guys who started the whole tape renaissance now 10 years ago. So I think we should just give Paul and his group a hand because they really are the people that started it all. Everybody kind of looked at them and thought they were insane. And, to give you a short story, I had two people over my place this month, played tape for them. Within 2 weeks, both of them bought tape decks. They just walked in. One of them had, I won't mention the name, but a very expensive $40,000 DAC. And after the first cut, he looks, digital will never, ever do this. And so, again, great panel. And on the left, that's a picture from Rocky Mountain a couple years ago of Paul and his partner Dan enjoying themselves in their room that year. And on the right is Mike Spitz. I just put Mike on there because Mike has that very famous phrase, nothing sounds like tape. And that's kind of, again, once you hear tape, it's really the truest thing. It's kind of like once you heard tape, there's no going back. If you just don't want to listen to anything else after listening to tape. And today, we're going to get into a couple things. How many people here actually have a reel-to-reel machine? Just raise your hands. Good, so we got a lot of tape heads. How many people here don't have a machine? Are you all here kind of get some information on how maybe to get started in listening to reel-to-reel, get your own machine? So we're going to have Chris is definitely going to talk a bit about it, and Dan about it. It's not as hard. It's pretty daunting. I remember when I thought about it, I was on the fence for years, like, should I get a tape machine, shouldn't I? There wasn't the software, and all of a sudden, then the Tape Project came out, now here's the software. How do I get a machine? Well, it seems really daunting, but you know what? It's no more difficult than having a turntable. In fact, it's probably less difficult, running it than having a turntable. Certainly, you don't got to replace a cartridge every year. That's kind of nice about it. So again, which direction do you want to go? A prosumer machine, kind of like a Technics or an Otari? Do you want to go to like a professional machine, like a Studer or the ATR on your left, okay? Or do you want to go a turnkey approach, like Greg Barron's United Home Audio Machines, where he's basically, the only thing really that he's using from an old Tascam deck is the frame. I mean, everything else in it is totally new. He's just, it's totally gutted, and it's, totally all-out effort. And I always do this each year, and each year it's been growing. One year it just had one. Now you can see this is the number of companies that now have tape available. And it's a pretty amazing list. And what I did was put a little musical note next to a couple of the companies whose releases are particularly outstanding. For instance, Groove Note, which is Ying Tan's label, they've been releasing it. Horch House, which is in Europe, they've been releasing some of the Oscar Peterson and some other things. Jonathan Horwich, who's here in the Magico room, is doing his own jazz releases, as long as some of reissuing some stuff that he's done in the 60s. Open Reel Records from Italy, great music. Opus 3, everybody knows Opus 3. They might be among the best tapes that you'll ever hear. Certainly when it comes to transparency, you know, and just the realness of sound with the miking technique that Jan Eric used, they're sensational. The tape project, they've got, what do you guys got, like 30 tapes out now, just about 30?
Close.
Yeah.
28, I think.
Yeah, and you know, they're all great titles. And one company that's really come on the scene that I really recommend, if you love classical music, and this guy is doing some of the best recordings, even if you don't have tape, they're on LP, they're on quad DSD, they're on DSD's Yarlung Records. Their tapes are phenomenal. I mean, and you know, unfortunately, the only thing I wish he would do the whole recording on 2 reels. Right now, he's just taking excerpts and putting it onto 1 reel. One of these days, maybe we can talk Bob into releasing the whole thing, because it's just so good when you listen to it that you want more. Anyway, so I don't want to take up any more time. So what we're going to do is introduce different panelists, and the first one we're going to have today is Chris Mara. Many of you may not be familiar with Chris, but Chris is the owner of Nashville's Welcome to 1979 recording studio. He's the owner of Mara Machines, which is the largest analog tape machine restoration company in the world. And he's going to talk a little bit. Hopefully he'll have some things to talk about as far as machines. His passion for recording led him to found the analog-centric Welcome to 1979 studios. He's had clients such as Pete Townsend, Eric Burden, and Third Man Records. They're also heavily involved in the vinyl industry, and he's doing his own mastering there. And if I remember from your website, you just are the first people to get a whole new electroplating machines in the world. So again, they're really getting heavily into releasing vinyl. And he specializes in restoring MCI machines that are basically in use all over the world. So again, without further ado, let's welcome Chris to the podium, talk about tape.
Thank you, Miles, for that wonderful introduction. All right, thanks. I always say my job is easy without cables and wires and stuff. Yeah, we were talking with, Chad and I had a nice conversation the other day about tape machines and misconceptions around tape machines. And I deal with it daily with the machines I restore and sell, is people think they're very complicated and require maintenance every day, and on and on and on and on. And this comes from the internet. There's a lot of forums that talk about that, and I'm not sure why people talk about tape machines like that. I'd say 95% of the people that buy restored tape machines from me to use in recording studios have never used a machine before, and I meet people on a regular basis that have had a machine from me for a couple of years, and I don't know who they are. And what that means is they've never had to call me or email me to figure it out. So I just have a quick little slideshow to show you how easy they are. This is one of my machines. It's a 2-track 1/4 inch, comes in 1/2 inch. That's the bigger chassis. There's also a smaller size chassis, but still, you know, definitely not a desktop. It looks a little, what am I trying to say? It looks a little scary, but I shot that photo so it looked impressive. It's really easy to use. So how many people here have not used a tape machine before? Who here? Okay. You, sir, in the blue right there, or somebody else right there. How do you think we would get this machine to play a tape? What button do you think we would hit? Right. So, okay, that's correct. You've passed. So now, if you wanted to stop it from doing that, what button would you hit? Probably stop? Yeah, it's really that simple. And fast forward, rewind. Boom. That's it. It's that easy. So I'll show you how to thread a machine. This is me in that nice shirt. That's really all you have to do to put tape on a machine. Of course, I've done it a couple times, but. And then another thing our company offers is Skype or FaceTime support. So if you do happen to have a question or a comment, or should something go wrong, we just Skype with you and walk you through it, and I view it as learning as you need to learn. If you want to learn something, you can have self-discovery and muck it up, and then call us and we'll straighten it out, and then now you learn. And the beautiful thing about Skype support is you have to do it yourself, and we guide you, so you are learning how to calibrate it if you want to calibrate it, or adjust the tensions if you want to adjust the tensions. But it comes out of the crate ready to use, and they sound wonderful. And I have just one last thing. So, and you'll never get one of these. I'm not going to be calling you saying, hey, guess what? There's Mara V.2 now, and it's only $6,000 more, and blah, blah, blah. So once you buy it, you're done. As long as you got AC coming out of your wall and something to play it through, you're done. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, cool. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so the next person that I'm going to have the pleasure of introducing is Dan Labry from ATR Magnetics. And hang on one second without my glasses. I am blind. Okay, so Dan is a Canadian who's now living in the U.S., and he's an analog recording expert who is fascinated with the intersection of music and science. And he's worked in a studio in Detroit, and after leaving there, he joined ATR Services and worked with the renowned Mike Spitz, who's fortunately no longer with us, but he certainly was one of the greatest resources that people in the tape area have had. And Dan currently leads both technical branches of the ATR group, the Magnetics and the ATR Services. And I think you guys are one of now maybe 3 that are making tape in the world?
Yeah, studio quality tape.
Yeah. And so again, ATR Services was founded in 1991, and they provide parts, repair services, and restorations for the Ampex ATR 100 series tape recorders. And in fact, if you go upstairs to Jeff Joseph's room today, I don't know how many you've gotten there yet, it's only Friday, you'll see one of the ATR 102s set up there with tape that you can hear. So without further ado, let me introduce Dan to everyone. Thank you, Dan.
All right, so I guess it's just to continue with some of the things that Chris was saying, but to add on to Miles's introduction. So I began working with Mike Spitz at ATR Service and ATR Magnetics in 2010. At that point, he was 20 years into restoring the ATR 100 series machines and about 5 years into the magnetic tape production. Both companies are headquartered in York, Pennsylvania, so south central PA. Immediately, coming up under his wing, he had me doing everything from chemical mixing and calendaring in the tape facility to tearing down ATRs and answering customer emails. So I think what I'd like to say about new tape ownership or what we're going to do moving forward with these machines is, I guess, similar to how Chris provides support for his clients. We have a similar approach where it's all about the user experience. So if for the machine side of our work, we offer essentially lifetime technical support. So that can be in quotations, but if you call or email, we'll be there to help you with whatever problem you may have. And the same is true with the tape production. If whether you're a studio or a home recordist or calling about and you're archiving tape made by some manufacturer 30 years ago and you just have questions about the medium, we're here to try and help you through your problems. Let's see. So similar to what Chris does with his tape camps and vinyl camps down in Nashville, we also offer full-day seminars. And so we go over the tape production process. We get very in-depth into each stage of the manufacturing so that we can fully understand the medium, the physical medium that is the tape. And then we spend the remainder of the day going over the calibration procedure, the magnetic recording process, everything related to that so that we can bring the user into a higher degree of comfort when using the machine. I'm trying to think of what else I'd like to cover. I look forward to answering specific questions. But again, I think, as Chris mentioned, for his experience as this medium is, there is a lot of misinformation online, And I think it's up to the gentleman on this panel and myself to proceed with just getting the proper information out to people and new users, to sort of take away any apprehension towards using the tape in the machines. Again, I look forward to answering your questions. Thanks.
As both of our panels said, it's really seems a lot more daunting than it is, especially, if you get a machine that's basically a turnkey approach like they're offering. I think Chris and I were talking, and he's even thinking about down the road later this year offering, is it an MCI machine that'll be made for audiophile. So again, just like he said, it's really plug and play. The real effort comes into, if you want to try and convert, like I've done, a prosumer machine and change the heads and this and that. That's going to take a lot more work, and you're going to need somebody, but that's not a necessary thing to really get into it. And I know like a lot of people really don't want to mess around with that. So these guys really have great approaches, and these machines have been around. They come to you, they're warranty, just like any other audio product you have. They're offering services, so what more can you really want from them? People probably have more problems with their turntables than they ever have with a tape deck. You don't break, you worry about snapping your cantilever off, with the tape deck. Okay, so our next speaker is going to be Paul Stubblebine, and kind of giving an introduction to Paul, who I could take pretty much the whole hour because given his background, but just a little short synopsis of Paul's many years. And Paul's one of these people that you may or may not know because he's a behind-the-scenes guy, and a lot of the stuff that you listen to, whether it be an LP, high-res digital, Paul's mastered tons of stuff. So, a lot of the work that you listen to may not be aware Paul's done. So Paul originally started as a staff engineer at Columbia Records in San Francisco, and the facility was bought by successful producer David Rubinson and became known as the Audiomat. And Paul was the mastering engineer there until it closed in 1984. In his 11 years in that building, he worked on records such as from the Grateful Dead, New Riders of the Purple Sage, and people my age will remember that group, maybe younger people don't. Ry Cooder, Dominic Argento, John Lee Hooker, and Van Morrison, among others. And I know some of that has come into play with a tape project because Paul's worked with all these tapes, and he really, when these guys are hunting which titles they're going to release, Paul's got this world of knowledge. Like, hey, I know that tape. I worked on that tape. So they, really get the best music for their tape project. He's also worked for other major labels, independent labels, and many audiophile labels. And Paul's worked with Reference Recording, Mobile Fidelity, Acoustic Sounds, First Impression Music, and others. And in 2006, Dan, Mike, and Paul founded the Tape Project, which was a label releasing music on high-quality reel-to-reel tapes. And they have a website you can go to find out more about the Tape Project. Very simple, tapeproject.com, and you can see what the titles are. If you have questions about the tapes, and anything you could think of, either Dan or Paul are usually there online at some time or another, or other people that are really into tape that will help you, same thing, guide you through any questions you might have. So again, let me introduce Paul Stubblebine to everyone.
Thanks. I'm going to keep my remarks brief to leave room for questions at the end also. But first I want to echo what we've heard from Chris and from Dan also. There's nothing scary about having a tape machine in your living room. The machines we use were built to withstand 18-hour-a-day use. I get to use mine maybe 10 hours a week if I'm lucky, and home listening, it'll last forever. And if you buy one from either Chris's company or Dan's company, it arrives probably in better shape than it left the factory originally. So, and operating one is not difficult. Maintaining it is not a scary proposition. You have to clean the heads every once in a while. It's a Q-tip and a little isopropyl alcohol. Swoop, swoop, you're done. I've been a recording engineer and mastering engineer for a long time, and started in the LP era. We recorded on tape because that's how you made a record, and if it was coming out, it got mastered to an LP. There just was no two ways about it, and no one thought about it. It was just the best we had. And after that, I got involved in the digital world and high-res digital, working with many people that were trying to push digital to sound better all the time, both PCM and DSD. And it's been a very interesting road, but I kept having experiences that reminded me how good tape can sound itself, how satisfying music on tape can be. Although I don't believe it's a perfect format, I've never said so, and I don't think you'll ever hear me say that it's perfect. At the end of the day, when I want to listen to music at home, if I have it on tape, that's the way I want to hear it. It's just the most nourishing and has the greatest ability to let me surrender myself and let the music cast its spell on me more than any other format. In my living room, other people may experience it differently, but that's the way it is for me. And I had a few experiences where it was just frustrating. We're putting so much effort into the other formats, although they have many advantages, and I don't really need to run down any other formats, but it still kept coming back, kept reminding me how much I like music on tape. And after a number of long evenings around the fire pit in Dan Schmalley's front yard, kicking it around, we realized we had maybe the resources to actually put out music on tape. We knew the tape manufacturers, the machine manufacturers, we had relationships with the record labels. Maybe we could do this. And so we tried, and here we are 10 years later. You saw the list that Miles put up there, about 15 outfits now putting on tape and growing, because Chad is now getting into it. That's big news. You'll see. So that's really all I wanted to say, that the reason I'm willing to go through the extra trouble to do tape, it's extra trouble on my end. As a playback format, it's not particularly troublesome. But on my end, to go haggle with these record labels to get rights to do this, and all the various steps in the process to keep it as pristine as possible, and to find original master tapes to work from. It's very easy to talk to a label and they'll say, yes, give us your money, and then you go to pick up the tape and you find out they're giving you a third generation copy. Everything we've put out has been from the original tapes, except one, long story, but one of our titles, no one has the original tape. We just worked from the best copy that exists. It's all on our web form if you want to read the sordid story. But we go to all this trouble because at the end of the day, there's just something magical about listening to music on tape. I'm just like the rest of you guys. I'm an audiophile, and one of my greatest joys in life is to be able to tap into this tremendous library of recorded music and hear it in my own living room. So it's why we do it. That's it.
Well, just to follow up on some of Paul's comments, I pretty much have all of your tape releases, and I have the tape releases in other formats. And one format I just wanted to mention is, for instance, reference recordings. And we're going to talk about the earlier reference recordings when they did digital and analog in parallel. And I know everyone used to rave about the records, but personally, I thought they were pretty much ho-hum. I really didn't like the sound of them. And all of a sudden, then Keith and Paul worked together, and Keith brought his magical tape machine, which is kind of one of those one-of-a-kind tape machines, and to Paul's, and they transferred the tapes. And I tell you, if you really want to hear like the Arnold Overtures recording, the Nojima, I think it was Nojima Plays Liszt, if you want to hear any of the other 4 titles that the tape project has done from reference recording, even if you don't own it, try and get a listen to someone who has it. But I'm going to tell you, it's the only way that you're really going to hear the wonderments that Keith Johnson does. I mean, he's really a brilliant person, but those tapes, the originals, really show it off. Anyway, last person on the panel I'd like to introduce is Chad Kassem of Acoustic Sounds, and he hardly needs an introduction because I think everyone in the world knows Chad. I do have one slightly funny story about Chad, and he may or may not remember, but Chad started out pretty much selling used records. And I only found out recently, do you remember a store up in Mamaroneck, New York, run by Rudy, Definitive Audio? And I always wondered, because we used to have a Friday night get-together every week, all the audiophiles, Michael Gindy, myself, Tom Gillette, Roy Hall, a lot of people used to always get up there together on a Friday night and listen. And there were all these records on the wall. And I never knew whose records they were. And Rudy had disappeared off the face of the earth. I started my audio forum, and who magically pops up in my audio forum after like 20 years is Rudy. It's like, Rudy, who were those records from? He's like, those were Chad's records. Like, I never knew those were Chad's records. Anyway, what I'd like to introduce Chad next. Chad's got a really exciting announcement to make about his getting into reel-to-reel tapes. I mean, there are a lot of us who've been hounding Chad over the years. Chad, you really need to do it. You really need to do it. And we'd always get a very polite response from Chad. Yeah, sure, buddy. I'm thinking about it. And, you know, it's nice to see that he's really now joined the group of releasing tapes. And, you know, one of the things, and I said this to Chad when he told me he was going to do it, I said, you know, one thing I've always said is that, you know, it was great Paul and everybody started it, but the person who's got the access to so many different types of music, you know, and one of the things is the software. When tape started, there was lots of hardware out there. And remember, we're not talking about the 7.5 IPS tapes that your parents had, you know, that were duplicated God knows in what speed. I mean, these are like 15 IPS real-time duplicated. So again, there's really no rushing the process. Like, you can't watch water and make it boil. Well, you can't, you know, watch these tapes and make them come off any faster off the machines. It takes a lot of time. Someone's got to sit there, switch back and forth, and listen to them, make sure that the tapes are good and things like that. So, you know, when they start doing real-time tapes, it's really a whole different world than what anyone is really used to. So I always said, like, you know, the person that we really want, you know, and I hear this because I talk to a lot of people who are thinking about tapes. We want rock. Let's look at the rest of the world listens to 60% of the music is rock music. You know, if we really want to get inroads, we got to have rock on tape. And that's why I think it's so important that Chad's really joined the crowd now, because he's got the access to these tapes that really now a lot of people, I'm hoping that not only audiophiles who are sitting on the fence thinking about getting into tape, but even people now who could, you know, refurbish machines. Like, hey, there's a real movement. Chad's doing this, it catches their eye. So, you know, again, what I'd like to introduce is Chad, who's going to talk about his getting into tape and what he's going to be doing. Chad?
Hello. Yeah, it's just we thought we should have a panel just to try to let everybody know that what's going to be coming, because, you know, everybody. I mean, everybody that's here and at this show is here because they're into the ultimate audio. You know, the experience. I mean, they're spend whatever it takes to get, you know, a new amplifier, a new turntable, or whatever, to have the finest audio in their house. And there's nothing they can really, or y'all can really do to upgrade y'all's system more than the source, and the source being analog tape. I mean, you can't get closer to the source than that. And you know, it's funny how, you know, a lot of our customers, you know, they'll spend $100,000 on an amp, or they'll do this, that, or the other, and, you know, nothing against the amp they bought. I'm sure it made a difference. I mean, hopefully you can hear the difference. But, you know, if they bought a tape machine and they got a good, you know, copy of a good recording, I mean, the difference is just so much greater than anything they could do to upgrade their system. Again, we're at an audio show, and, you know, different amps sound different or better, and things like that. But there's nothing they can do. I don't care what you do, that you can make as big an improvement as to go straight to analog tape. And I mean, if you don't believe me, go to Jeff Rowland's room or Jeff Joseph's room, 532, and hear some of Paul's tapes or some of our tapes. But we, you know, we're into making records, and that's gets you very close to the source with the 45 RPMs and this and that. But again, the tape is just one level closer. And the reason that all of this is happening is because of y'all. You know, I mean, basically, you know, for tape to come back like it has is just incredible. And you know, people are going buying really expensive machines. Everybody's doing this without any software, you know what I mean? It's just crazy that people would buy so many machines and expensive machines without really not much to play. I mean, they were really counting on people stepping up and I say, you know, they bought the car, and now we're here to give the gasoline, sell the gasoline to y'all so you can run the car. But man, it's impressive how many people bought so many tape machines without much, you know, without the fuel to run them. But it's all working out. It all got to work together, you know, and it's just got to work together. They got to have the tape, and they have to have people that make the tape. Without that, which I mean, at one time, I think ATR was the only people making tape. So I mean, that was pretty scary, and it could happen again. So you know, they have to have the tape, they have to have the titles, the music, and then they have to have the machines. And so we're just want to get involved. It's because everybody, I mean, you know, Miles and Dave Robinson and everybody just, hey, when are you going to do some tape? When are you going to do some tape? I mean, even Paul, even though he's doing it, he's like, hey, man, we need you to come and release some titles also to, you know, to keep this thing going. And it, you know, so nobody, it's not competitive at all. I mean, the more the merrier, the more that more tapes that come out, the better it is be for everyone, the consumer, the other dealers that sell it, and the people that sell tape machines. So we're going to try to get y'all as many tapes as we can. It's very, very difficult to negotiate with the major labels on this because it's such an odd thing. It's like we're going to reissue. We want to reissue these tapes, reel to reel. Yeah, right. You know, they just can't even believe it. You know, it's so strange to them that they just don't want to do it. You know, and then when you tell them what they sell for, they just don't believe that either. You know, so it's a lot harder than anybody would ever imagine to get these. I mean, even you can walk up with a pile of cash in your hand and say, look, you know, here it's yours. It's so much paperwork involved. But anyway, we're just here to say that, you know, we appreciate the support, and we people are begging for it. It's coming. It's going to take a while. The one thing is we just got a record pressing plant, and we're manufacturing records. And you know, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very labor intensive. But man, making tape compared to making records, I mean, if you think making records is hard, which is like the hardest thing there is in the world to do, and it's time consuming, and it's just, but at least one machine can make 750 records a day, you know. To make tape, I mean, one-off, real-time tape, it's like, it just makes making records like, it's just so much, yeah, it's hard, but we're going to do it, and we're going to do it well, and, you know, everybody's working together, and we got, you know, the two professional tape machine makers are here that service the recording industry. Like all the major studios use the ATR to record. So it's like, and a lot use the MCI as well. And at our studio, I have both. And Doug Sachs also had the MCI machine. So, you know, from the pros use those two brands, but I'd just like to, how much of y'all's business changed from pros to consumers? I mean, is it about from 100% to what? Just for ATR?
Maybe new machine sales. I don't know if this is on. New machine sales, 25% go to recording studios, 75% going to home listening and high fidelity.
Right, but like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, what was that?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Over the past 4 or 5 years, it's just been more machines prepared.
Right, but I mean, a good guess. I mean, 5 years ago, were you selling 10% to consumers?
Yeah, right. So 10, 90, 90, 10 now.
Yeah, so it's just flopped. I mean, in just a few years. I mean, Chris, are you selling more to consumers?
I haven't launched the model yet, but I've been getting a lot more requests. And a year ago even, it didn't even cross my mind.
Right. Well, what's happening is the only problem with the pro machines, I mean, is they're bigger, you know, and a lot of people want the smaller, and that's the only problem. But to me, it ain't a problem. I'll just move things around in the house. We're gonna have the best, you know. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we all
You know.
drive SUVs. I mean, come on.
So, but yeah, I mean, we'll lose a few pieces of furniture for it. But anyway, I want to say thank everybody for the support and the encouragement. I mean, it's just like people just encourage you to get in the high res download business, you know, and they're just relentless, you know. Every time you answer the phone, they're like, well, when are you going to do the high res, you know? And now, when you're going to, you know, get in the record pressing business? Well, now it's like, well, when you're going to get into the tape business? And it's just, since my job is to do what my customers ask for, and what my customers want is the ultimate sound. I mean, they want to get as close to hearing, you know, Elvis as they can, you know, and or whatever, you know, and that's our job, to pick the titles and to bring it on a format, and that's what we're here for. And it's really amazing how many people are getting into it, and I think it just began. So, thanks.
Thanks, Chad. Well, I think Chad's in a little unique situation, but don't you own like half of Kansas? But thank you, everyone. You know, I just wanted to just add a little footnote to maybe, you know, how would you go about in terms of using a prosumer machine if you wanted to go like a Techniques or an Otari machine. And again, those are, you know, really good machines to, you know, to choose from. They generally have good transports, but, you know, you're dealing with 1970s type solid state electronics. And the other issue that you'll find with those machines is more that you're going to need to get a machine or convert it so it can play IEC equalization, okay? But you got two basic curves. There's another one we could talk about, but basically you need to be concerned with either NAB or IEC. And all the new tapes today are coming out in IEC. Most of the older machines were only built for NAB. So that's why a lot of people can send machines back. I know even Jeff Jacobs will modify them so you can, you know, run right off of the head and run it into outboard electronics like I do. Like Charlie King over here. Charlie, raise your hand. Like Charlie's been kind of like my tape guru, and he's set up my machine, and he's really knowledgeable on machines. I think one of the people who came over to my place and is buying a machine is getting it from Charlie. He's buying a Studer with Charlie's electronics inside. So again, there's lots of different roads to Rome. So again, I want to thank all the panelists. And again, let me open up the floor now. I'm sure there's some people with some questions, so raise your hands and shoot away. Gentleman in the back.
Question about generational degradation. You were making new masters. How many companies, Chad, you have a record pressing factory, so you know that you have a pristine disc, you make 750 for a tape. How many times can you run the original tape to make copies? How do you get around that problem? That at some point, regardless of how good your machines are, you're going to run into that there's wear because it is a living.
Well, this is probably they could probably answer that better. I'm sure you can make many good tapes off of I mean, it definitely is going to be some wear. You know, the question is, you know, how much wear, and but I mean, Paul is a mastering engineer. He's deals with tape that you probably have to bake, and then Dan, they make tape, and so it's probably better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that the number of passes we use a tape in making dupes for our customers, we make 3 dupes at once, by the way, so do several hundred copies. We've run the master maybe 100 times, our running master, not the original master. I think that wear at that level is a non-issue, and I think for the customer who buys one of these tapes and enjoys it many times, we hope, we've chosen music they'll want to listen to again and again. Nowhere near a problem, nowhere near a problem. There have been instances in the recording process back in the 70s when people were recording on multi-track tape that certain bands would spend a year making a record, and they would, in fact, run enough passes to notice a degradation. But in the world we're in, it's a non-issue. There is an issue sometimes with tape itself degrading. Some of the master tapes we get to work from clearly have lost a little spark. Some of the others have not. And curiously, the older they are, the more likely they are to retain the spark. There was a dip in the 70s in the formulations we had. But that's a separate issue. I think a person thinking about getting into tape for the home literally does not have to worry about the number of passes these tapes have gone through.
Hey, Paul, you brought a show and tell, so why don't you do your show and tell while you're...
All right. I didn't bring slides. I brought 2 artifacts. One is just a packaged album, like what we sell our customers in case no one's ever seen it. For us, an album is 2 reels. So that's, and mostly we sell 1/4 inch, although customers can buy 1/2 inch versions. So a couple of reels in a box, in boxes, and album art almost as big as the LP. So that's what an album looks like when a UPS man brings it to your door. The other thing I brought, my partner Dan Schmalley's company, Bottlehead, makes a couple of repro electronics, one in kit form and one in ready-made form. I use them both all the time, and I just brought one of them. This is the ready-made version of it. It's about a $4,000 product, has both unbalanced and balanced outs. If you're in a position where you have to drive your cables 100 feet, this will do it on the balanced out. But if your machine is right next to your preamp, you can take the unbalanced out. This is made to go with any machine that you want to convert to bring the head cables out to the externally, which I've done to my ATR at home in my living room, and I've done to my Technics 1500, which I have at my summer place near Yosemite. That's what it is. Anyone who wants to look closer at the end, come on down. We'll have these here.
And, you know, you may take that for granted, but they kind of set the standard for everyone else to meet in terms of the packaging. I mean, you know, they looked at it, and it wasn't just the quality, but everything had to kind of fit everything. And, you know, a lot of the companies out there just kind of put the tape in a white box, and maybe they enclose something as a afterthought to tell you, like, what you're listening to. Except for a couple of the new Italian companies, and we all know how Italians are. And the tapes that I've been
Italian
getting from
design.
Italy, the packaging is like, blows me away. I mean, they're having special packaging and hard plastic cases, and it's pretty amazing what they're doing. So again, you know, but these guys have really caused everybody to step their game up, no matter, you know, who's releasing tape. And now if we're charging, you know, $350, $400 for a tape, I mean, you know, you have to have something more than in a white box.
Yeah. Well, we thought so. When we started out, we knew we were going uphill with this, putting out an album at 4 times the price of the most expensive multi-LP 45 RPM set, and we wanted people to feel when they picked it up that it had value. And so we went to a lot of extra trouble. We made custom dies for our unique flange. We searched around to find a company that could make these nice boxes at a price we can afford. Now, in the end, it's not costing us much more than routine packaging, but we felt it was worth it. We had to go through all this extra work in the beginning so that we would have something when we place it in a customer's hand, they would be impressed.
You know, and I just want to
Immediately feel that there was care behind it.
And one other thing is, I know people are kind of like, you can maybe hear a gasp when you might say, well, the tape is $350 or something. But, you know, let me add something. You know, you look at some of the tapes that the Tape Project has done, some of the Blue Notes that they've reissued, and you look at what an original Blue Note reissue is going for now. I mean, some of them are scary. I see them going for, first of all, you don't even know what shape they're in. I mean, you know, God knows what shape they're in, and they're going like on eBay for $3,200. And I look at that and go, do you play it or do you frame it and put it on the wall? You know, so, you know, when you look at, hey, you're getting something that's right off the master and you know it's great, as opposed to something you're buying off eBay, which is a crapshoot. I mean, which are you going to go for? I mean, to me, the answer is pretty obvious. Okay, any other questions?
I have a question about tape that's like, you know, some of the cars you get butterfly heads on, and then if you go to JRF, you get they're a higher frequency output.
The extended response heads.
Yeah, the flux, yeah.
Sure. So, okay, so there are plenty of things that confuse when it comes to track formats and tape widths, that sort of thing. But before I go too deep, I just want to say establishing a relationship with a technician for a specific machine or reel-to-reel sort of general purpose is always a great step for moving forward with your deck. Extended response heads, for example. So because of the physical nature of the playback process, we have a natural emphasis in the low frequency. So, for example, at 15 IPS, 60 hertz is emphasized because of the geometry of the head and the recorded wavelength. So, so we're assuming a standard geometry of the head. What the extended response head allows for, it's a broadening of the face of the head, changing the geometry of that head, allowing for when you increase to 30 inches per second, allowing for an increased top end output, you're shifting the low frequency emphases down one octave to broaden the full spectrum. So the term extended response is really referring to the 30 IPS application to really broaden it with a sort of a 15 IPS low end and a 30 IPS top end.
We've got like 1 or 2 more minutes, but I just want to add one question to the panel, because you guys have a lot of experience with it, and I've heard very differing opinions. But in coming and working with these master tapes, you hear some people saying, hey, you should go back to the original heads, the head block that was used with the recording to get the most out of it, or do you feel just like having a good optimized geometry in the heads is sufficient to redo and reissue tapes?
The machines now are, like that I restore, are better than the tapes that we use to transfer. Because with Studio I own, we do a lot of transfers of older materials from the 60s and 50s and 70s. And, you know, it's a better machine now than then, especially in terms of constant speed and tension across tape path, pack, that kind of thing. So.
Great.
I think their heads are better now too, and the whole machine is better.
Yeah.
I just want to make the point in case we all know this and we've forgotten to tell you. Tape machine consists of a transport, the heads, and the electronics. They're all important to the sound. The transport is about half. Remember what we learned 25 years ago with the LP playback, the quality of the turntable actually matters. Well, tape is an electromechanical, electromagnetic mechanical format as well, and the mechanic part really, really matters. Where the game is played is pulling the tape across the heads. That steadiness of the speed and lack of disturbances, tremendously important. But the heads and the electronics make a big difference too. And the electronics that we have available, this is just one option. Charlie makes one, and there's several others. In my opinion, outdo the electronics that came with our machines, even from the legendary companies, Ampex and Studer and so forth. We have the ability to improve on them with the electronics. And the heads, you mentioned from JRF, the extended response head that's made by Flux Magnetics. They're making fabulous heads. They're
And the
at
biggest
least as
point is
good
that
as
there are
any
heads
we've
available,
ever
'cause that's
had.
most people's comments, like, what am I going to do? The heads are worn out, whatever. It's like, that's not a problem anymore because there are heads out there. That was the weak point, right?
Yeah. Yep. And I should say, since I do know a good bit about vinyl, because we cut vinyl masters at my studio, and not to put one format down over another, but if we're talking about fax, there's no diameter loss on analog tape. The first song sounds exactly the same as the last song, and that's just physics. That isn't possible on a record. So if you're talking about fidelity, then that's a huge point. So.
Well, I want to thank everyone. We need to wrap up. Thank everyone for coming. I want to thank this wonderful panel.